During the 1960s, Europe built some of the most luxurious automobiles in its entire history. And the most interesting part is that many of them were not created to impress with speed. They were created to impress with prestige, hand-finished interiors, fine woods, the highest quality leather, and levels of comfort that seemed impossible for the era. And believe me, some of the automobiles you are about to see still make many modern cars look ordinary. Let's begin. 1965 Bentley T1. This car was not built to impress everyone. It was built to impress the right people. And that was exactly what Bentley represented during the 1960s. Because while many manufacturers tried to demonstrate luxury through size or ostentation, Bentley bet on something different. Understated elegance, clean lines, perfectly balanced proportions, and the absence of exaggerated elements gave it a refined and timeless appearance. It didn't need to grab attention. Its exclusivity spoke for itself. But here is where things get really interesting, because the Bentley T1 shared much of its engineering with Rolls-Royce, which meant it was among the most advanced and luxurious automobiles that could be bought in Europe. The suspension offered extraordinary smoothness, the acoustic insulation was exceptional, and the build quality was on another level. In fact, much of the interior was finished by hand, carefully selected fine woods, the highest quality leather, and an attention to detail that few manufacturers could match. Each automobile required countless hours of manual labor, and that was noticeable on every surface the driver touched. But luxury wasn't the only important thing. Under the hood sat a refined 6.2-liter V8 that provided a quiet, smooth, and effortless drive, exactly what a Bentley buyer expected. And that contrast is precisely what makes the T1 so special, because it didn't try to show off wealth in an obvious way. It represented it elegantly. Today, the best Bentley T1s usually range between $40,000 and $120,000, depending on their condition and originality. 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud III. If there was one automobile that represented European luxury in the 1960s, it was this one. Because while many brands made luxury cars, Rolls-Royce made status symbols, and the Silver Cloud was one of the best examples. At first glance, it conveyed prestige, the imposing front grille, the perfectly proportioned lines, and the almost aristocratic presence made it look like it belonged to another world. It didn't look like a car for executives, it looked like a car for kings, and in many cases, it was. But here's where things get really interesting. Because the Silver Cloud III didn't stand out solely for its image, it stood out for the way it was built. Each automobile was assembled with an extraordinary level of care. The interiors were covered in genuine fine woods, premium leather, and hand-finished details by specialized craftsmen. Everything was designed to create an absolute luxury experience. Even silence was part of the luxury. The ride was so smooth that many owners described the feeling as if the car were floating over the road, and that was exactly what Rolls-Royce intended to achieve. Under the hood, we find a massive 6.2-liter V8 that delivered power with absolute smoothness. Rolls-Royce never published official power figures, because for the brand, numbers were not what mattered. What mattered was the experience, and few automotive experiences were more refined than this one. Today, the best Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud III usually range between $80,000 and $250,000, depending on the bodywork and state of preservation. 1968 Mercedes-Benz 600 Pullman. This car was not simply a luxury automobile, it was a demonstration of power. And during the 1960s, few machines represented prestige better than this car. Because while most manufacturers tried to build comfortable and refined cars, Mercedes decided to create something extraordinary, the best automobile money could buy. And the result was spectacular. The immense bodywork, the massive wheelbase, and its almost presidential presence made it look more like a state limousine than a conventional car. And in many cases, that is exactly what it was. Some of the most powerful and influential people in the world chose the Mercedes 600 as their personal vehicle. And the interior lived up to such engineering: fine woods, premium leather, space worthy of a private lounge, and levels of comfort that few automobiles could match. Everything was designed for the passengers to travel in absolute comfort. Under the hood, we find a massive 6.3-liter V8, capable of producing around 250 horsepower, more than enough to move this gigantic limousine with surprising ease. Today, the best-preserved Mercedes-Benz 600 Pullmans easily exceed $500,000, while some historical examples have reached several million dollars at international auctions. And now, I want to know something. Of the cars we have seen so far, which one best represents European luxury from the 1960s? The refined Bentley T1, the aristocratic Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud III, or this impressive Mercedes-Benz 600 Pullman? Let me know in the comments. 1967 Jaguar 4.2 OG. This car didn't try to compete with Rolls-Royce, and yet it offered a luxury experience that surprised even the most demanding buyers. Because during the 1960s, Jaguar had a very particular philosophy: to build automobiles that combine prestige, refinement, and performance for a price considerably lower than that of some of its most exclusive rivals. And the 4.2 OG was probably the best example of that idea. It looked like the type of car you would expect to see in front of a five-star hotel in London, and that impression continued inside, because the cabin was a true showcase of British craftsmanship: carefully polished fine woods, high-quality leather, and an attention to detail that turned every journey into a special experience. Furthermore, passenger space was extraordinary, especially in the rear seats, something very important for luxury automobile buyers of that era. But here is where things get interesting, because unlike many luxury cars in the 1960s, the Jaguar also offered remarkable performance. Under the hood, we find a refined 4.2-liter inline-six, capable of producing around 265 horsepower, a very respectable figure for a large luxury sedan. Thanks to this, it could exceed 118 miles per hour, 190 kilometers per hour, a speed that many more expensive competitors could not easily match. And that contrast is precisely what made the 420G so attractive, because it combined luxury, space, and performance in a single automobile. It wasn't the most exclusive, it wasn't the most expensive, but it was one of the most complete luxury cars in all of Europe. Today, the best Jaguar 4.2 OGs usually range between $20,000 and $70,000, depending on their condition and originality. 1962 Lagonda Rapide. Very few people could afford this automobile, and that was precisely the idea, because the Lagonda Rapide was not built to compete with conventional luxury cars. It was built for an extremely exclusive elite, people who wanted something rarer than a Jaguar, more exclusive than a Mercedes, and much less common than a Rolls-Royce. At first glance, the Rapide conveyed an elegance very different from other cars on this list. It wasn't ostentatious, it wasn't intimidating. Its luxury was much more discreet, more sophisticated, and perhaps that's why it has aged so well. But here is where things get really interesting, because behind that elegant four-door sedan hid the DNA of Aston Martin. In fact, Lagonda belonged to Aston Martin, and the Rapide shared much of its philosophy with some of the most prestigious grand tourers of the era. That meant it wasn't just luxurious, it was also extraordinarily refined. The interior was finished with premium leather, genuine fine woods, and an attention to detail worthy of the best British automobiles of the 1960s. Everything was thought out to create an exclusive experience, an experience that very few buyers could enjoy. Furthermore, production was extremely limited. Just over 50 units were built, which makes the Rapide one of the rarest automobiles on this entire list. Under the hood, we find an elegant 4-liter inline-six capable of producing around 236 horsepower, a respectable figure for a luxury sedan from the early 1960s. Today, the rare Lagonda Rapides that appear on the market easily exceed $400,000, while the best examples fetch much higher figures among collectors. 1967 Daimler DS420. This car was not designed for drivers. It was designed for passengers, and that perfectly explains why it became one of the most respected luxury automobiles in Europe. Because while many manufacturers talked about power or speed, Daimler was focused on something different: the massive wheelbase, the majestic proportions, and the classic Daimler grille conveyed an immediate sense of importance. It looked like the type of automobile reserved for ambassadors, royalty, or top executives. And in many cases, it was. But here is where things get really interesting. Because the DS420 was used for decades by royal families, governments, and luxury hotels around the world. That gave it a reputation that very few automobiles have managed to achieve, a reputation of absolute prestige. And the interior completely lived up to it. Passengers had extraordinary space, the finishes were refined, and the ride quality was so smooth that it seemed designed to completely isolate the occupants from the outside world. Everything was thought out for comfort. Everything was thought out for luxury. Under the hood, we find a refined 4.2-liter inline-six, capable of producing around 245 horsepower. Today, the best Daimler DS420s usually range between $20,000 and $80,000, depending on their condition and history. And now, I want to know something. Of all the cars we have seen so far, which one best represents true European luxury from the 1960s? The imposing Mercedes-Benz 600 Pullman, the aristocratic Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud III, or this elegant British limousine? Let me know in the comments. 1964, Facel Vega, Facel 2. This car had a problem. It was so exclusive that most people never got to see one in person. And perhaps that is why today it is one of the great secrets of 1960s European luxury. Based on the attention Rolls-Royce, Mercedes-Benz, and Jaguar were grabbing, Facel Vega was building some of the most sophisticated and exclusive automobiles on the continent, and the Facel 2 was their masterpiece. At first glance, it looked like a true high society grand tourer. The long bodywork, the elegant proportions, and the refined French design gave it a presence that rivaled some of the most prestigious cars in the world. It looked expensive, and it truly was. In fact, when it was new, it could cost more than many Ferraris and Aston Martins of the time. But here is where things get really interesting, because the luxury of the Facel 2 didn't end with its exterior design. The interior was spectacular, very high-quality leather, hand-finished details, and a dashboard inspired by aircraft instruments that made the driver feel inside something truly special. And besides, it was also extraordinarily fast. Under the hood, we find a massive 6.3-liter Chrysler V8 capable of producing around 390 horsepower, an impressive figure for a luxury automobile from the early 1960s. Thanks to this, it could exceed 150 miles per hour, becoming one of the fastest and most exclusive grand tourers in Europe. Today, the best Facel Vega Facel 2s easily exceed $300,000, while the most exceptional examples reach considerably higher figures. 1963 Mercedes-Benz 300 SE. If the 600 Pullman was the car for heads of state, the 300 SE was the car for Europe's most successful entrepreneurs. And that already says a lot. Because during the 1960s, Mercedes-Benz was building some of the most refined automobiles in the world. But the 300 SE occupied a very special place within the lineup. It represented the perfect balance between luxury, prestige, and technology. At first glance, it conveyed a discreet elegance. It wasn't as imposing as a Pullman. It wasn't as ostentatious as a Rolls-Royce. Its approach was different, and precisely for that reason, it attracted a very exclusive clientele. It also stood out for its advanced engineering. It featured air suspension, an extremely sophisticated technology for the early 1960s. This allowed it to offer an incredibly smooth and comfortable ride, a feature normally reserved for much more expensive automobiles. And the interior lived up to it completely. Carefully finished fine woods, premium leather, and a feeling of solidity that few manufacturers could match. Everything conveyed quality. Everything conveyed prestige. Under the hood, we find a refined 3-liter inline-six capable of producing around 170 horsepower. The figure might not seem impressive today, but it allowed the car to move with absolute smoothness and reach speeds close to 115 miles per hour. An excellent figure for a luxury sedan of that era. Today, the best Mercedes-Benz 300 SEIs usually range between $80,000 and $250,000, depending on the version and state of preservation. And more than 60 years later, it remains one of the most refined, prestigious, and luxurious Mercedes of the entire decade of the 60s. 1963 Maserati Quattroporte. Most luxury cars of the 1960s had one priority: comfort. But Maserati had a different idea. Why not build a luxury sedan capable of competing with the best sports cars in Europe? And so the Quattroporte was born, an automobile that practically created a completely new category. The long bodywork, the elegant lines, and the perfectly balanced proportions gave it a presence worthy of a great European limousine. It looked like the car of an important Italian businessman, or someone accustomed to staying at the best hotels and restaurants on the continent. And that was exactly what Maserati was aiming for. But here is where the story gets really interesting. Because under that refined bodywork, a conventional engine wasn't hiding. A true Maserati engine was hiding. An impressive 4.1-liter V8, capable of producing around 260 horsepower. An extraordinary figure for a luxury sedan in 1963. And thanks to this, the Quattroporte could exceed 143 miles per hour. A speed that made it one of the fastest sedans in the world. The interior was packed with high-quality materials, fine leather, handcrafted details, and a typically Italian atmosphere that combined luxury and sportiness in a unique way. An extremely rare combination for the time. Today, the best first-generation Maserati Quattroportes easily exceed $150,000, while the most exceptional examples reach considerably higher figures among collectors. And when we look at all these automobiles together, it becomes clear that European luxury in the 1960s was something very special, because there wasn't just a single way to understand luxury. The obsession with excellence, extraordinary materials, hand-finished interiors, and levels of exclusivity that turn these automobiles into true status symbols. Now, I want to know your opinion. Of all the cars we saw today, which one best represents European luxury from the 1960s? The aristocratic Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud III, the majestic Mercedes-Benz 600 Pullman, the exclusive Bentley T1, or one of the other automobiles on this list? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through the most luxurious European cars of the 1960s, don't miss the video appearing on your screen right now. Because there, we will travel a decade back to discover the most luxurious European cars of the 1950s. Some of those automobiles were so exclusive and refined that they helped set the standards of luxury we still admire today.